What's going on, YouTube? We're back at it for another video, and today we're going to be making a tier list out of the survivors in Evil Dead the game. And the base fundamental for the ranking for each one of these survivors is going to be based around the abilities that these survivors provide for the rest of the team, how beneficial they are for the team, and further extending or increasing their success ratio when it comes to wins or overpowering that demon between each match. And at the same point, how many different variety of combinations of survivors are they going to benefit at the same time, as there will be some of these survivors that will be placing into A tier that with a very specific group of survivors or specific classes, they will be in S tier in that moment, but with the larger variety of different combinations of survivors won't be as beneficial. So we'll talk about that once we get to each one of these survivors. But we've got more than a few things to talk about with this video. We're going to be starting off with Pablo. Now, Pablo's going to be a B tier. He's definitely not bringing the most when it comes to the support side of things. He's not the worst, but sadly enough, there's only one support class character that is actually going to be just above par compared to the other two. It's substantially, their abilities just outweigh anything that the other two can do, but at the same time, Pablo does have a bit of a unique ability, probably the most unique ability, which is his ability to be invisible to the demon, or as invisible as he can be without actually being invisible. Now, as playing as the demon, facing off against Pablo, trust me when I say he can slip underneath your radar fairly quickly. He can be a bit frustrating to deal with, but this ability does not make him completely overpowered against the demon. More than likely, it's just going to be a frustrating factor for that demon, as it has been for me. Does not increase the odds of that team actually winning based on him being a little bit sneakier, or a lot sneakier than the other survivors out there. But at that same point, talking about his invisibility, if he does jump into a car, that demon will still see him. That's about the only time that you will see him. If he does shoot a gun, some people have said that he will still pop up. Other people have said he doesn't. I can't confirm or deny this one. It's not something I've actually been able to test quite yet, but keeping that mentality of maintaining your stealth as long as possible in the beginning and not shooting guns, as you will be playing some of these other survivors, is something you want to kind of continue to utilize. That way you don't get comfortable with that possibility of shooting a gun even if Pablo doesn't show up, and then possibly playing another survivor accidentally shooting a gun because you got that mentality of playing Pablo thinking you're not going to be showing up. You know, it could hurt you in different matches. So maintaining that is going to be something you definitely want to continue to utilize in the beginning portion, as maintaining that stealth is going to be a very powerful play in overcoming some of those solid demon players. Now, that being said, sadly enough with Pablo, when it comes to his abilities minus the invisibility, it really is more towards himself, getting himself those shields back, or maintaining at least one shield bar. And with his first ability, being able to drop an amulet for anybody on the team, or just grabbing it himself, is sadly a really long cooldown of 2 minutes. I mean, you think about some of the other abilities that each one of these other survivors actually have. This is by far one of the longest cooldowns and least beneficial when it comes to actually being able to utilize it. Now, this is what puts him down on the B ranking, sadly enough. He can be utilized in the proper way. With the amulets, it could be beneficial to play with 2 warriors and a Lord Arthur. This could be a power play, considering the warriors, once they fully upgrade their shields during a match, they will be able to utilize that 1 amulet to gain 2 shield bars. But at the same point, it's only going to be every 2 minutes. It's only 1 amulet, so only 1 warrior is going to benefit from that. But it could be that little bit that gives those teams enough power to be able to tank some of that damage and maintain that tankiness throughout the match when it comes to the warriors specifically. This may have been the focus to what some of the developers were actually looking for when it came to Pablo. I think it needs to be reworked a little bit. Maybe if the cooldown was brought down to 90 seconds, or possibly 80 seconds, or 75, it may be a bit more beneficial, but at the same time, you really don't want Pablo to just be consistently dropping out those amulets. So I think 90 seconds would be a good rough estimate, considering 15 amulets over 30 minutes. If you're constantly popping it every time it's on cooldown, it sounds nice, but at the end point, it's really only benefiting either one player, or if you're trying to utilize it for the rest of the team through the support class's ability to utilize an amulet or shimps in order to give healing to people within your aura. It's not going to give them a full shield bar, and shimps are always going to give you the more beneficial healing than amulets will, based on the fact that it's just not giving as much as the shimps will. Now, that being said, we're going to move on from Pablo. Be it as it will be, he just really isn't bringing enough to the table to be something of an A tier or even an S tier. Now, maybe after some reworks, maybe after possibly we're reworking some of those passive abilities, he may be something that's more beneficial later on. I wish possibly one thing they would have added, instead of him constantly gaining a shield bar, maybe if he had a faster ability to revive players or resurrect players, that could be something that makes him extremely powerful, because not only is, he's got that invisibility, but if he could move over and grab one of those people underneath the radar of that demon before, it's that little bit of time that that demon may not notice him that could be the most when it comes to being able to pull somebody up. And if you could make that pulling up or reviving a bit quicker with a passive ability on Pablo, it really would bring him up to an A tier, if not an S tier by that point. But that being said, we're moving on. We've got Leader Ash here, and he's going into S tier now. There's one specific thing about Leader Ash. With all of the leaders, obviously, they have an aura that they're going to be giving a buff to each one of their teammates while they're within that aura. And the one specific attribute from his aura, which is 20% fear resistance. You cannot beat this. In general, Leader Ash is one of those characters that is going to be a great fit for just about any team, as with some of these demon players, especially if you've got a rock-solid survivor group, they're going to need to utilize possessing those survivor units in order to take down those survivors effectively. If you've got somebody like Kelly or any one of the hunters at max level, they're going to be able to delete those boss units, those possessed units, and they're really going to have to work for those opportunity moments in order to take some people down instead of just getting deleted or possibly getting stuck on cooldown. So the ability to further increase the fear resistance just by standing around this guy is going to be substantial at maintaining the ability to stop that demon from further increasing his power, ability to down some of the survivors by utilizing the survivors, or just reducing his ability to possess those survivors at the same point, or give you enough time to get to that next campfire without having that bar further increase to the point where he can possess you while you're just trying to strike that match, which, trust me, we've all been there, and it's extremely frustrating. But not only on top of that, he will also gain 10% damage for everybody within his aura that works towards the melee side of things and ranged weapon. It may not seem like that much, but when it goes for both of the damage types and it's consistent flat 10%, you just can't beat that. And at the same time, once you get him to level 25, he will be able to double those values, so you'll have 40% increase on fear resistance and 20% damage increase on resistance. Now, you will have to utilize finishers in order to maintain that ability to have that maximum fear resistance and damage boost, but having 40% on top of possibly some of these characters having fear resistance within their skill tree at the same time is going to be an extreme power play against a lot of these demons and really make it a tough time for them to actually utilize the survivors in order to take down the survivors themselves. Now, that being said, he also has the ability to damage balance bar with a nice little thrust up with that chainsaw, which not only is going to affect anybody within the radius, or it's not going to be one of those things that just affects one person. It's going to have a radius effect, and being able to destroy the balance bar of not only one unit but multiple units can be a very beneficial moment as well, especially because you can utilize it like Scotty's ability in order to push back and stun those enemy units in a moment. So if you need somebody rezzed up in that moment, you can get over there, pop that ability, push back those enemy units, even a possessed unit at the same time, give them enough time to pull off that res. That's why I say Leader Ash is going into the S tier. Now, we've got Annie. Now, there's a very specific reason why I'm going to put Annie in the A tier and not the S tier. And with the S tier possibility, now she is one of those that could be an S tier when it comes to playing with warrior classes. Now with Annie, right now, apparently it is bugged. I've learned this recently that with her main ability, she should be giving 100% increase to ranged weapon damage whenever she pops that ability for 15 seconds. Sadly enough, it is not 100%. Apparently, it is only 30% increase, and this would explain a lot. I've already max leveled Annie the many times that I played her and popped that ability. It never felt like I was getting 100% increase, so I thought as soon as I'd get that 100% increase, it was one of those moments where you think you're going to be on the same level as a hunter class that's max leveled, but it was just not the case. I was not seeing the numbers that I thought I would be seeing, and this does bring her down a little bit when it comes to that ability. At the same time, with that ability, trying to utilize that and utilize it with the rest of the team, you're going to need to be able to communicate before you even pop that ability that, hey, people need to get ready to utilize their ranged weapon in order to get that damage buff and try to take out a target extremely quickly, whether it be a possessed unit, a boss unit, or something along those lines. But at that same time, it can create a little bit of confusion. People may need to stop what they're doing, try to focus on something else. They may end up starting to take some damage when they're trying to aim at one specific target, if there's a lot of units in play, and some people may not just be able to utilize that at the same time. And considering it's only 30% instead of 100%, it really isn't going to be a huge benefit for Annie. But technically it will be a 40% increase, as she does have a passive ability within her aura that everybody does gain 10% from her ranged weapon damage. But the huge power play with Annie is going to be, once you max level her, you will have an increase to balance bar damage on both the basic and elite units by 25%, but 100% towards boss units. Now this is where she gets into that S tier, or where she could be an S tier when it comes to playing with warriors. Now, if you've got 2 warriors on your team with Annie, effectively, if those warriors are not only stacked out with balance bar themselves, or even if they don't have that much balance bar increased on their skill tree, that 100% towards the boss unit can be an extreme power play at just stun locking that boss unit, or even possessed units at that same time. Just having that additional 25%, you're going to be able to delete that balance bar that much quicker and diminish the ability for that demon to really apply the damage and gain that power. You're going to slow that power creep as much as possible, diminish the amount of damage they'll be able to deal, still be able to maximize or retain the maximum amount of healing that you can possibly have throughout that match, instead of having to constantly waste it by taking damage, tanking those hits. You'll just be able to quickly move through them as much as possible without having as much damage done to you at the same time. But that's why she's going to be an A tier, considering that 30% increase. Some people may be thinking that, this would be great with hunter classes. It's just not going to, it's just going to be overkill by that point. Hunters do not need further increase of their ranged weapon damage once they're max leveled. They'll be 1 to 2 shotting, if not just 3 shotting, depending on how much they've upgraded through that match on boss units, possessed units, and depending on the weapon that they're using. But they will be able to delete anything fairly quickly without the need of that 30% increase. And with that 30% increase, sure, it may be getting it closer to the point where it's consistently a one-shot, but it's only for 15 seconds. It's just a bit overkill at that point, and the balance bar damage isn't going to be that beneficial for those hunter classes, considering they're already two-shotting things. More than likely, they're going to be deleting it quicker than they are going to be deleting that balance bar. And effectively, it's just one of those wasted attributes that's just not going to come into play as usefully as it would be with the warrior classes. Now let's move on to the next one. We've got Lord Arthur. Now this is a tough decision, and I'm going to have to put him in A tier, considering the fact that he is a main focus on melee damage. It's another one of those moments where it's going to work out better if you've got him with 2 of the warrior classes rather than possibly just 1 warrior class, 1 hunter class, and 1 support class, considering that 60% increase is only going to be beneficial for the warrior class and making their damage extremely substantial. And I will say, with Lord Arthur, as soon as he pops his ability, not only do you have 30% increase to your damage on heavy and light attacks, but once he pops that ability, that's an additional 30%, so you have a total of 60% damage to deal with that melee damage. But it is only going to be something that will be extremely beneficial for the warriors. But in that case, you'll be doing as much damage as some of the hunters in those moments by the end of that match, which can be substantial, up into the 60 to 70,000 damage at the end of that match. As long as you're playing with a solid demon player and he's constantly putting those units out, and you're able to clear it with each time that Lord Arthur's buffing you, it can be an extreme power play. But that is why he's going to be an A tier, as it will not be as effective with every different combination of each group that you'll be going with. But S tier, I'd almost argue S plus tier when it comes to playing with somebody like Warrior Ash and Henry. Absolute power play with that. You throw it in with Cheryl. I mean, every different variation of demon is going to have a struggling time with that group, especially if you have them all at level 25. unbeatable matchup right there. That's one of those rock solid combinations that is going to be plowing through and making the hardest time for any demon they'll be facing off with. And now we've got Warrior Ash. Now, a lot of people may think to themselves that he needs to be an S+. Trust me, it's a hard decision to make, but there's only one survivor that's going to be in the S+. Now, he comes close. He comes close to being an S+, but he is just an S tier, in my opinion, considering it's still going to rely on the person playing this Warrior Ash in order to really make the most effectiveness out of him. Arguably, Warrior Ash is the most tanky unit within the entire game, the hardest to take down as long as the person knows how to play him. Because the many times that I've faced off with so many different groups of survivors, and there's one person that really knows how to utilize Warrior Ash, he's the last person standing every time, and he really is frustrating to take down at certain moments. If you're, a smart demon player, you'll know the certain times when you need to really cut into him, because the main thing that makes Warrior Ash every bit of just tanky and absolute melee DPS tank is going to be his flask ability. Anytime that he drinks this, he is not only getting 30% damage increase, he is getting 50% damage reduction, adding 250 health to his health bar, or essentially healing himself for 250 health bar, and reducing the fear that he's already got built up on himself by, I believe, 50 or 30, somewhere around that mark. I can't remember specifically, but he's just doing everything all in one moment that you'd want on every single survivor, and that's going to last for 20 seconds right there. And those moments when you see that boss unit come in and you see that possessed unit come in, you just pop that flask and roll into the face of that demon and just eviscerate them, and they'll barely be able to do any damage to you. I mean, it's almost like they're just trying to scratch you with freshly cut fingernails. They're just they're barely doing anything to you in that moment. But at the same time, he's not going to be tanky forever. It is only 20 seconds. This is why he goes into S tier and not S+ tier. You need to know how to utilize this at the right times to be able to utilize that maximum tankiness and really amplify his DPS. If you've got Lord Arthur on top of this, especially after he pops his ability, you got to think about the simple fact that not only are you getting 60% from Lord Arthur in that moment, but you've got another 30%. You're 90% increased damage on the melee side of things. Now, the 30% increase to damage does affect his ranged weapon damage at the same time of his melee damage, so do keep that in mind. That's something that can be a little bit more effective when utilizing something like a boomstick at a little bit of range. If you're taking out a basic unit that may be just about to attack one of your teammates, that can be something you can utilize. But at the same time, the warrior class is substantially decreased in damage when it comes to ranged weapons, so you really do want to effectively just maintain melee damage with any warrior. But that is something to keep in mind and throw in there. But it doesn't end there when it comes to the tankiness of Warrior Ash. On top of that, anytime that he has a shield bar and it gets depleted by damage, it'll immediately do an explosion radius out as well, hit multiple targets, essentially an AoE attack that's within close proximity to himself that deals 200 damage, which can immediately delete one of those basic units, or any basic units that may be around you. But on top of that, as you level him even further, you will be able to get partial shielding back anytime that you perform a finisher on some of these units. Now, this may be a bit tricky to get done in certain cases, considering he has so much damage that a lot of basic units he's going to be one-shotting. You may be able to utilize this with elite units, but in some cases, if you're utilizing heavy attacks, you're going to be one-shotting elite units at the same point. So you kind of need to work around some different tactics with that moment, possibly utilizing light attacks in order to get them to the point where they're essentially one-shot, perform the finisher, get that small amount of shielding back. Goodness, fumbling my words here. But in that moment, it's going to be a very tiny amount of shielding, and you can utilize that moment to constantly be dealing that 200 damage. Not only in that finisher moment are you invulnerable to damage, but right after you pull out of that, if one of those basic units smacks you, you've got multiple basic units around you. Boom! You've got a clear of basic units right there from that shield just getting popped, 200 damage outward. And then, to top it all off, he's going to have weapon mastery with the chainsaw. Now, apparently this only does 5% increase to damage, but it also does balance bar damage and dismemberment damage on top of making him faster with the attack speed with that chainsaw, which the attack speed is the main thing, and with Warrior Ash, obviously, your Ash, you want that chainsaw. And if you can find a higher rarity of chainsaw, trust me when I say you're going to be dealing some massive amount of damage as long as you're able to utilize that flask at the proper times. But even without that flask, you'll still be doing a large amount of damage before even further increasing that damage. He is the melee DPS tank by far, absolutely S tier. This is definitely somebody you want to level up first. You definitely want them on your team. You really can't go wrong with having him on your team unless there's just no support character. But even then, the simple fact that he's able to tank a lot of things, and if you utilize that flask at the proper times, you should be able to maintain yourself without even needing the support character. But by all means, don't think this is somebody that you really want to go off on your own all the time. You may be able to solo some demons at certain moments, especially if you have the upgrades all the way and you have enough resources, but at some point, that demon's going to be able to consistently keep coming back. He has endless resources he can work with, whereas you do not, and if you're wasting all those shimps, you're wasting your flask on certain moments, you're just wasting all the amulets, you're inevitably going to be hurting your team in that moment. So that's why he's not at S+. You really need somebody that knows how to utilize this character properly and in order to really get the most powerful effect out of him. But when you do, it's one of the best out there. Now let's talk about Scotty. B tier. B tier, I'm really going to keep this short and simple. I really haven't played with him that much, and trust me, I've played with Scotty characters a lot of times. He really isn't the worst character out there, but trust me when I say he's just not bringing a whole lot to the table when it comes to his abilities. And when you look at the Warriors class, Henry and Warrior Ash outshine him in every single way. There is nothing about him that truly stands out in between both of those characters in that class. When it comes to Scotty, I mean, he's still a viable character. I'm putting him right there next to Pablo. Obviously, opinions are opinions. You may love Scotty. You may throw him into a team. He's still going to do some substantial damage. He's still a part of the warrior class, and with Lord Arthur, he can still deal some serious damage, and he can be a bit tanky. But at the same point, when it comes to the abilities that could be benefiting the rest of the team, or just overall his survival against the demon, or ability to 1v1 the demon, is not that high as compared to Warrior Ash or Henry, and we'll talk about Henry here in a moment. But with Scotty, he does have a cleave damage ability. I wish it was a bit higher with the damage. It may make him a bit more useful, considering anytime he swings on one character with a heavy attack, the characters or the units next to that character are going to deal 13% of that damage that he just dealt to those other units. In moments, I think there are certain cases where, especially with a heavy attack, you'll notice in certain moments your swing will go in a large radius. You may hit multiple targets. In that moment, it can be a little bit more beneficial when it comes to increasing the amount of damage. As one person gets hit, the 13 damage procs. If another person gets hit in that same swing, the 13 damage procs on the other ones it could hit on the other one that you already hit with the heavy attack at the same point, and so on for how many targets you may be hitting. A lot of times with those heavy attacks, the maximum you may be hitting when it comes to those units is 3. That's the max that I've seen in certain moments, especially if you come in right as that demon throws the portal for a basic unit right in the middle, sledgehammer or lumberjack axe, you just swinging it and striking each one of their heads as they're coming out. That is going to be a bit of a power play, but it doesn't benefit everybody at all moments, and a lot of times you won't have those units always compacted right on top of you. If Scotty had the ability to be, have an aggro ability where he can pull units towards him away from the rest of the survivors, that would make this ability a bit more substantial and make him a bit more useful. I kind of wish that they actually did that. But with his main ability, it really is, it's just lacking. As we said with Warrior Ash earlier, anytime that his shields deplete, he's going to have a 200 damage explosion around him. Basically, Scotty's ability is close to the same thing, except you can pop it whenever it's not on cooldown, but it only does 100 damage. The only thing useful about this ability is in certain moments when you possibly have somebody downed, you've got your support character going to grab them up. It'd be a good idea to go over close to them, pop that ability to push back the enemy units, give them enough time to pull off that res and get that person back into the game. But beyond that, it really isn't doing a whole lot of damage, and it's only useful for moments like that. It's very situational, and it's just not bringing a whole lot to the table. On top of that, his last ability is Mastery with Lumberjack Axe, and sadly enough, it's only a 5% increase on damage, balance bar, and so on. And as compared to the abilities or passive abilities when it comes to the skill trees for each one of the warrior classes or class characters, Warrior Ash and Henry just outshining him beyond belief, and that's why he's going down to B tier ranking, because no matter what, you could throw him into one of these varieties of combinations of survivors, but he's just not going to be pulling the type of weight that those other two warrior survivors are actually going to be bringing to the table. All right, let's talk about Henry now, which is going to be S tier. Plain and simple. Now, there's more than a few factors that make Henry S tier. Well, when it comes down to it, my main focus with Henry is all about balance bar damage. He is the ultimate warrior with a sledgehammer. Considering, Warrior Ash is going to be all about the chainsaw, you really want to focus with the chainsaw on him when it comes to melee damage. He's more suited towards dismemberment damage. Now, they arguably do have the same skill tree. You could add the balance bar damage to Warrior Ash, but you're more than likely wanting to head more down the DPS route and the dismemberment route, as that's going to be more useful towards some of those fleshy enemies that you'll be facing off against. But with Henry, if you get a sledgehammer, you maximize his balance bar damage. Not only does he have an ability that he can pop for 7 seconds of invulnerability. Now, we got to talk a little bit about this ability. There's a few things that you can do with it. Not only is it going to be one of those moments that you can effectively just pop that ability and go straight into the boss unit's face as soon as he spawns. If that demon isn't the smartest, or sometimes won't notice immediately, you will have an aura around you once you pop this ability. Solid demon players will notice this after a moment, and they'll start to run from you as they know they can't deal any damage in that moment. But with this ability, not only are you not going to be taking any damage, but you will also be able to just not get stunned at all. So it's going to make it even better for those moments when that demon hasn't realized yet. He starts attacking you. You're not going to get pushed back. You're just going to constantly be able to swing and destroy that balance bar. Stun locking is Henry's best suited method of play when it comes to him, and it is overpowered completely. Trust me when I say most possessed units and boss units, after 3 swings, they're already down. And with those heavy swings, you can automatically just immediately have them stun locked. And if you have the skill tree node where finishing a chain of combinations of hits gets that 50% increased damage, by the time you've made it to the point where you've broken their balance bar, you're on that 4th hit, you get that last heavy attack in, substantial damage in that moment. So not only are you able to break that balance bar, but you're dealing some heavy damage in that moment, allowing the rest of the team to also deal their damage, deal with that threat as quickly as possible, but at the same time saving your ability to be tanky. So you only need to take 1 or 2 hits. Obviously, if you're just tanking all that damage and you're not breaking the balance bar, you're more than likely going to be taking more than a few hits, more damage than you'd like to. You're going to be wasting healing resources in that moment. But with Henry, you can take a couple of those hits, but then stun lock that enemy unit. Huge power play with this one, and there's a couple other things to talk about. When it comes to tankiness, Henry does have the most health out of anyone in the game, I believe, considering he can further increase through his passive abilities on his skill tree as you level him up. He'll not only further increase his health, but his shield bar by 10%, and he'll also have an ability to reflect damage anytime that he gets hit by 30% of the damage that he's taken. So any enemy unit all the way up to the boss, 30% of that damage they're dealing to him is going to be reflected back. Now, I don't know if this works with his ability. I haven't really looked at it all too much. A lot of times I'm focusing on the balance bar when it comes to Henry. I'm really just trying to stun lock any unit that I may be facing off against. But with him, it's all about the heavy attacks. It's all about taking down that balance bar. But in those moments when you're able to reflect that damage, it may not be the most powerful tactic or best ability that you could be throwing onto this character, but it's definitely not hurting him at the same time. You don't want to go down the route of trying to utilize that 30% as something of a damage build, trying to make him as tanky as possible, because that is, trust me, not going to work out. 30% of the damage a lot of the units are going to be dealing to you isn't really going to be that substantial as compared to your own hits, and breaking that balance bar, just destroying the ability for that demon to deal damage, is going to be a huge power play, considering they're going to constantly either by the time that balance bar is broken, depossess that unit, jump into another one, you're going to constantly be able to just focus in on that and just stop them from being able to deal damage, which is going to further slow that power creep of that demon. It's going to be the ultimate power play, and it's going to be even more powerful when it comes to facing off with some of those boss units. Something to talk about, though, with his ability is that the special ability on the boss units of each one of the demons can still affect him, and what I mean by this is Henrietta's gas attack, even if you pop the ability for invulnerability, you will still get affected by that gas. With the Puppeteer, Eligos, his AoE electric strike, that's still going to stun lock you for a moment. Sadly enough, you won't be taking any damage in those moments, but it's still going to pretty much eat the time that you had available, because that timer is still going to be ticking down. So in those moments, they may waste your invulnerability in that moment. And with, Evil Ash. With Evil Ash, he can still pick you up and drain the health out of you, but he won't actually drain the health out of you, but it will still feed his own health bar. He may not be doing damage to you, but it will still heal him, and it'll stop you from having that ability to utilize that invulnerability. But lucky enough, with Evil Ash, trust me, Sledgehammer, and all that balance bar damage, Evil Ash is a cakewalk, trust me. You'll be putting that guy down real quick. Now, the only problematic one to face off with is going to be Eligos. The Puppeteer boss unit is quick. He disappears, he goes around. He's really hard for melee to work around with that boss unit, and especially to try and get that balance bar damage down. But lucky enough, with the amount of balance bar damage you have with Henry, and if you have that combined with Annie's 100% increase on that, the few times that you can get close enough to deal some of that damage whenever he does this heavy attack, or whenever he's trying to do some of those light attacks on some of those units, if you can get close enough to deal that damage, he does have a fairly weak balance bar. And trust me when I say he is one of the more squishy boss units and squishier units out of all of the units when it comes to the game. So in those moments when you can catch up to him, you're going to be taking him down fairly quickly. But other moments, you're going to be just chasing him around, and he's going to be focusing on other people, and it's going to be extremely frustrating. Overall, Eligos is not really the one that you really want to utilize melee against. You really want some ranged weapon damage from a hunter to really take him out quickly and effectively, but at the same time, if you can get close enough with Henry, he's going to be your best bet at destroying him, or stun locking him, then destroying him as quickly as possible before he's dealing a lot more damage to the rest of the team. Now let's talk about Hunter Ash. Now, Hunter Ash is going to be in the A tier along with most of the rest of the Hunter class characters. Now, there's only one that's going to be in the S tier, and it's based on his abilities. We'll talk about him in a short amount of time, but the reason why each one of these hunters gets placed into the A tier is the simple fact they are double-edged swords. Not only are they going to be able to shut down demons, they will be able to 1v1 demons, not consistently, but they will be able to do it from time to time as long as they have the ammo and resources available to them. But at that same point, the demon can possess them and utilize that power, that maximum DPS they have with those ranged weapons in order to completely wipe out the entire survivors group. Trust me, it's happened multiple times to me. The utmost important thing with any hunter class when it comes to their skill tree, reduction of fear, and anytime that you're next to a light source, try to maintain or put the skill points in to maximize the amount of reduction of fear that you gain from any type of light source. Considering your main mental thought while playing as the hunter class is to stick with the group, really reduce the amount of fear that you're going to be intaking, and at the same time, hit every campfire you possibly can. If you're getting halfway up on that fear meter, and you know there's a good distance before the next objective or the next area, you want to constantly hit those, constantly maintain a good supply of those matchsticks. You really want to maintain the lowest amount of fear at all times. In some cases, arguably you shouldn't be the only DPS on that team, so there should be somebody that should be able to handle things on an objective. If you're getting close to fear, there's no real light source in that objective, and you're getting close to that high fear level, it may be a good idea to start heading towards the hills, heading for that next campfire, trying to get that reduction of fear, instead of leaving yourself open for that opportunity to completely ruin your team. Now, some things that can counter this that I probably just need to talk about here, just give you a little bit more information besides just the tier list, is, it's a good idea to have somebody on the warrior side of things that possibly just has a pistol. It's going to be the easiest way to stun lock somebody that does get possessed. So in those instances, when a survivor that is a hunter class that is max leveled, has that super increased range weapon damage, you'll be able to stun lock them with that pistol by effectively just constantly just hitting them, hitting that stun. They'll get pushed back a little bit until you're able to, or to effectively disable their ability to actually utilize the weapon on that hunter class when they get possessed. But that's going to be a good rule of thumb to go by, and that's why each one of these is going to be in the A tier besides one of the hunters. Now, with Hunter Ash, very unique one, and a buddy of mine, Vegeta, would say he is an S tier, but at the same time, he has one unique ability, and the rest of his abilities really aren't something that's actually going to benefit the rest of the entire team. Now, he does have the exercise ability, which is a 60-second cooldown. Anytime that he pops it, he can pop the possession of a demon out of a survivor or a basic unit. Now, when it comes to the elites and the boss units, he'll only reduce the amount of infernal energy that demon has while he's possessing that unit. This can be a little bit helpful in certain moments, but I wouldn't really waste it on those times, as you're just going to delete them with the amount of damage you have as this hunter anyway. You want to save that ability for those moments when survivors get possessed, so you don't have to deal any damage to them, and when those basic units get possessed, because there's nothing more frustrating than just popping that guy out before he can even deal any damage. But at the same time, when you're a hunter class, obviously when any survivor gets possessed, arguably with the max leveled hunter and the amount of damage you're dealing, and depending on what weapon you're using, you're more than likely going to 1 to 2 shot a possession out of a survivor unit. I mean, just absolutely quickly. So the exorcism isn't exactly the most important ability. It can be useful, it can be beneficial in small portions or situational moments, but at the same time, it's not something that really bumps him up to that S tier. On top of that, he is useful with double barrel shotguns, and with the hunter class, apparently their mastery of weapons actually boosts their damage by 20%, so that's a substantial amount when it comes to a double barrel shotgun for Hunter Ash. But at that same time, he will be starting with a double barrel shotgun as well, and he can see crates through walls or in any location around him, which can be useful. This can be something that is beneficial. We've all had that moment where there's a gray crate somewhere, we hear it, you're trying to find it, and it's just blending in with the boxes around. You may have circled around it 3 times. I've done this many times, but in those cases that can be beneficial for the Hunter Ash. But at the same time, we can hear those crates, so it's not a huge benefit to the entire team. It's just something that makes life a little bit easier. But that's going to be Hunter Ash right there. I mean, obviously a solid choice, but not the best choice you can make. Now we've got Ed. S tier, plain and simple. The reason he's not S plus tier is that RNG does play a factor with his abilities, but the reason he is S tier is that he can make that RNG a bit better for us in matches. Now, with Ed, he also has a special ability, which is a special flashlight, that when he pops it, he has 40 seconds to disable any of the traps that the demon either can place or has already placed. Now, there is a problem that I've run into multiple times while utilizing this flashlight, where sometimes if you're right next to one of those trap locations, say especially like a tree, if you're trying to disable that, especially on an objective, you want to make sure that he's not able to utilize that to really maximize the fear on the survivors while they're on that objective. That way you can kind of move a little bit more freely in that circle. But at the same time, if you do it right up next to some of these traps, it won't automatically disable them. Sometimes you'll have to kind of swing it around. We've all utilized that flashlight in certain areas to try and reveal some of that hidden loot, and not always does it immediately reveal that item. Sometimes you get it through the wall, you circle back around, got to do a couple of once-overs on it in order to finally get it to reveal itself. Works very similar with the disabling the trap flashlight. Now, at that same time, if the demon has already placed a trap on certain spots, especially with a tree, it really doesn't always work out that well. It's like 30% of the time that it actually disable it. And I'd say the same thing about just some of those basic traps that portal out a basic unit or elite unit. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it'll disable that trap, and other times you're just going to want to slowly walk up to it and try to just allow it to disable it. But I mean, you can see the little hue of the different coloration or distortion where that trap is. Sometimes you'll walk up to it and it won't even disable it until it's already been triggered. Very frustrating, but at the same time, the ability to disable those traps, especially on an objective before he can even place those traps, and in those few moments when it does work against those traps that he has already set, it can be a powerful play to slow down the power creep of that demon as you go through and reduce the amount of fear that each one of your survivors or teammates is going to be taking. Now, after that, sadly enough, he does get a 100% increase to his flashlight's battery life, which is, it's nice. You could effectively leave it on for a large portion of the game without having to turn it off and won't run out of battery, but not all of the most useful thing. But in certain cases, just having that extra battery life could mean the difference between revealing some of those resources for some of your teammates that they may not have been able to if they've accidentally left their flashlight on for too long. Now, after that, he does get a proficiency with the crossbow. This is another one of those cases where he does get 20% increase to the damage with the crossbow. I know crossbow is a frustrating weapon to say the least, but the damage is substantial if you use it with Ed. Most of the time I do end up using it with Ed, considering if you have another hunter on your team, or if you've got people utilizing, or like a leader on your team, and they want to utilize a shotgun, or they want to utilize the pistols, at least you've got, multiple people utilizing different ammo types, and you're not struggling to constantly maintain your own ammo supply based on the ammo supply of somebody else needing the same ammo type. So in those moments, a lot of people don't use the special weapons. The saw gun's trash, the blunderbuss is trash, and arguably the crossbow's trash as well, but in the hands of Ed, it actually works out pretty well, considering you can do 2,000 damage per shot as long as you're hitting them in the head, and 1,000 damage per shot whenever you hit him in the body, as long as you have the right skill tree built out with him, which can be beneficial. It's still a heavy damage dealer when it does hit the target. I know the shot placement can be extremely frustrating, but at least it's got some benefits to it, and the reload speed's extremely quick, considering he's got that increased attack speed with it, so it does end up working a bit more in your favor, making it a bit more useful if you decide to use that, but you don't have to. You could utilize shotguns, you could utilize revolvers, or whatever you'd like to that's going to be better suited to your playstyle. But the main reason that he's going to be in the S tier is the simple fact that not only does he further increase the amount of items that any unit you kill is going to drop, which is going to further increase, just maximizing your resources when it comes to ammo, amulets, or shimps. Sometimes even matchsticks can drop from them. It just further increases the odds of that happening and really helps to resupply the team in certain moments, especially on objectives. Maybe you're running low on shimps. That next enemy basic unit you kill could drop another shimps. Really helps out in those moments. And in some cases, if you're not having to use too many of those shimps, it could just really resupply the support person on your team, and you'll just be able to immediately run over to the next objective. But the biggest reason is the simple fact that as soon as you play Ed at level 25, jumping into a match, he's going to further increase the rarity of every chest or every crate that's going to be inside of that match. Now, sadly enough, RNG is still going to play a role in this. You may have some matches where it's still quite a few gray crates, you're not really seeing too much, but it will still further increase the spawn rate of blues and purple chests, or crates, I should say. I keep calling them chests, chest, crate, whichever one you want to call it. But now, legendary crates don't happen all that often. In some matches I played with him, yes, it does further increase the legendary crate possibility, at least one of them. But just having the ability in some matches to where almost every crate's going to be blue or purple, that is a substantial increase to those upgrades, and can make it to where everybody on the team gets fully upgraded before you even make it to that first objective. Now, in the case of an RNG moment where things are not going as proper, a lot of times I've found where maybe going to each one of the main map piece objectives or the objective areas, you may find a lot of gray crates there. It would be a good idea to try and loot some of those locations that are off the beaten path, or maybe in between that aren't right next to the objective, or just something along the way. Hit those locations, you'll more than likely find a purple or blue crate there, if not multiple of each. In the case of having a level 25 Ed, that's why he gets up on that S tier. He can really benefit a team in a huge way, and he brings that damage to the table, and it's the only reason he's the only hunter that's going to be up on that S tier, considering if you are using a crossbow, it's really hard for a demon to possess you and make it effective to take out the entire team while utilizing a crossbow. So he's a little bit less of a double-edged sword, but I will say, yeah, that crossbow is still going to be hitting really hard if he does land the shot, so be careful. Just to keep that in mind, you still want to maintain that fear level pretty low with it. even if you're utilizing that crossbow. Even more so if you're utilizing other weapons, because he still has as much power as the rest of the hunter class. Now let's talk about Kelly. Now, Kelly is going to be the maximum DPS out of the entire game. There is no one else that is going to match the amount of damage that she can put out, and it is all going to be based around her main ability, which will further increase your damage by every time you pop the ability. Not only will you have infinite dodge for that moment, but you'll have 20% bleed damage procced for any time that you hit any unit. Now, obviously, the demon can't use that against you, but Kelly is still going to be a powerhouse with each one of these weapons like any of the other hunter class, so keep the double-edged sword thing in mind. I have to keep repeating this because I've seen more than a few people play as hunter, and I start barking at people that let that fear level get high and then wipe out the entire team. I mean, I've been there, but if they're being careless and they're not maintaining it as they should be, it's time to speak up. But with Kelly, not only are you going to have that infinite dodge ability, but at the same time as you level her up, there will be another ability that'll be passive all the time. Anytime you perform a successful dodge, you'll be able to proc a 5% lead, or bleed, I should say, not lead. But in that moment, effectively, you have 25% bleed whenever you proc your ability and dodge at the same time. Huge power play with Kelly. I mean, she can dodge just about everything. Each one of the hunter class has the most stamina and most proper efficiency when it comes to utilizing that stamina for dodges. I think effectively you can have 7 dodges total if you have fully upgraded stamina during the match and the proper skill points in the skill tree. So 7 dodges, I mean, you're going to be able to avoid a lot of damage, and with Kelly being able to successfully dodge, get that 25% bleed, you could be right in that boss unit's face, dodge over to the left right next to him, pop the head, dodge again, pop the head again if they have that max health increase from their skill tree. And I mean, telling you right now, sometimes it only takes one shot. If you've got that higher upgraded boomstick, that bleed damage is the thing that's going to make it a one-shotter. Unbelievable. You'll be able to delete everything. Arguably one of the easiest classes to 1v1 with the demon, but like I've said before, you've only got so many resources. By the time you dip down to no ammo, your effectiveness against that demon has pretty much dropped to nothing. Because as one thing that needs to be stated with the hunter class, they are the weakest when it comes to melee damage. But Kelly gets a bit of a benefit on this side when it comes to the meat hammer. She is proficient with the meat hammer and apparently also gets a 20% increase to her damage and everything along with that, and attack speed when it comes to the meat hammer. And I will tell you right now, if you find the legendary meat hammer, she's effectively going to be 3-hitting just about any unit. Or, well, not any unit. Basic units, elite units will be taken down a lot quicker as well. She'll be having a further increase to her balance bar damage, so you'll be able to finish her, stun lock those units and take the least amount of damage as possible and not have to utilize your dodge ability until you're facing off with a possessed unit or a boss unit. But with Kelly, I mean, you just can't go wrong when it comes to being the ultimate DPS on that team. I love playing as this character, and her dodge ability with that 20% bleed just, I mean, anybody with a Kelly on their team that knows how to maintain their fear level should be just steamrolling through that demon. I mean, they're going to have to work as hard as possible as long as you're sticking with the team and just shutting down anything that they put out, and you have enough ammo to really maintain throughout that match. Unbeatable. Now let's talk about Amanda. Now with Amanda, there is a bit of a broken nature with her. Apparently, with Amanda, she has an ability that has unlimited ammo. She's going to be an A tier. Just like I said before, we're going to go short and sweet with Amanda. I haven't really played with her all that much, but I've heard a lot about her. I've played with more than a few Amanda characters, and they hold their own, or she holds her own just like any other hunter. But her proficiency is going to be with pistols. Not a big fan of pistols, but 20% increase of damage with the pistols can be enough to really make it pretty useful. And the simple fact that she can have unlimited ammo with that pistol with her ability for 7 seconds can be a pretty powerful play. But she may be better suited to utilizing shotguns. There is something right now that apparently may be a bug or something along those lines that's extremely powerful. There is another exploit that can be talked about with this that I'm not going to talk about because it's completely overpowered and shouldn't be in the game. That one's definitely a bug. But the one tactic that you can utilize with her is once you get her to level 25, consecutive shots increase the damage by 2% per consecutive shot. Apparently this can keep stacking up to a total of 60%, I believe was the total. Don't quote me on that one. I believe that may be the cap on how much percentage increase can be maximum, but 60% increase of damage is huge, and even if it is only 30% increase of damage, again, that's massive when it comes to one of these hunter classes. And the reason why it is so effective with a shotgun is, I believe, apparently each pellet counts as a consecutive hit. So if you can reduce the spread with one of the skill points on the tree and get that headshot damage increased, you could effectively be gaining a huge amount of damage increase on top of the already massive amount that you have from the skill tree when it comes to ranged weapon damage, and then having the ability to not have to reload with a shotgun by utilizing her ability. You can see how effective she can become when it comes to immediately deleting a lot of these boss units or any type of unit that may be facing her, but more specifically boss units, considering this is going to be more effective in the event that she's able to proc that ability. But it kind of puts her up there with Kelly. I'm not sure which one of them is going to be dealing more damage. They may be reworking Amanda at some point to where that consecutive damage isn't as much. You think about, it's going to be more effective if it's going to be one round gives the 2%. And it may be a bit overkill when it comes to that shotgun, given 2% per pellet. But at that same point, Kelly's just going to have that flat 20% every single time that she makes that shot, whereas with Amanda, you're going to have to work your way up to get to that damage point where it's on par with Kelly. So that's the kind of differing moment where Kelly just kind of has that maximum damage, whereas Kelly or Amanda can get up to there, but take some time, take some effort, and really relies on how precise you are with your aim. But with Amanda, that's going to be, pretty much everything about her that's really going to be useful. You really can't go wrong with her, but at the same time, not the most beneficial. Ed's always going to be that one that's going to be S tier, but still bringing a lot of damage to the table, has the unlimited ammo ability where she's not really, she can still be useful in those moments as long as she has that cooldown available whenever she may run out of ammo, which could happen, especially if you got some selfish teammates you're rolling with randoms. They could just be picking up ammo left and right and just leaving you high and dry, even though they may be a leader character, and they definitely don't need the ammo as much as you do. Now let's talk about the worst character in the game. Support Ash. Terrible. Worst character, I believe in people that play him. I'm not going to call him trash, but it's a trash character that they're playing. But they recently nerfed him, and right now, effectively, the only thing that is good about Support Ash is his main ability, which is reducing the fear of people around him by 50. Now, you have to be pretty close to him in order to actually get this to proc with you, so this is another one of those situational abilities where it may be useful at certain times, more useful for the hunters. I would say arguably, warriors, as long as you have a pistol or something ranged weapon and they're not right up on top of you, you can more than likely be able to just unlock them and push them out of that possession before they can actually deal some serious damage. But at the same time, it's just, you've got to have a lot of communication to get this to work properly. You have to be right next to each other in order to get it, and a lot of times that I see people playing Support Ash, they utilize it on themselves, and they think, even if somebody's like a good 30 yards away from them, they think it's still going to affect them. They might, their head's in the right place, but they're not utilizing it in the proper way. They usually mute. A lot of people are muting this game for whatever reason when it comes to randoms, but when you've got somebody like Support Ash, he's just not bringing the healing to the table. But the worst part is the simple fact that they reduced the amount of healing he does off of every heavy attack. When I first started playing the game, it sounded really good. You think, every time I do a melee strike, I'm giving, not only myself healing, but the rest of the team healing. But then you look at it, and it was 35 before. I tried to utilize it with a combat knife. Really wasn't effective. Now, even worse, since the fact that it's only 25 health each time that you actually do in a heavy attack. And you just can't increase the speed at which he's attacking somebody, and there's no proficiency to make some type of weapon faster with him either when it comes to heavy attacks. And heavy attacks are slow in general. But when you look at the health bar, of each class, and the lowest being, I believe, 800 with the hunters, possibly, or 900 possibly. Everybody has 900 to 1,000 something, or 1,000 plus, and then that's just base level health. If they further increase their health during the match, that's even more that they have. But just looking at the base number of 1,000, and the fact that you're only getting 25 health every time you do a heavy attack, and how long that takes in order to just keep proccing that 25, you can start to notice how there's a real lack of healing here, and it's almost like, just one unit needs to flick you on your ear, and most of these basic units are doing 70 damage per hit. If you're doing heavy attacks with something other than the combat knife, you're more than likely going to be taking hits at the same time that you're dishing hits out to that unit, so your 25 health really doesn't mean anything. It's kind of more reducing the amount of damage you're taking more than it's actually giving you any proper healing at that same point. Then on top of that, we've got to talk about the two abilities underneath that, where you need to headshot an enemy for another player to get 30% damage on that unit. It marks them with a little dot on their head that's glowing. Looks like a little crosshair. It looks pretty cool, I'll give it that. But it's not effective, and apparently it does proc with melee users, but melee users are not going to get the most benefit out of that increased 30% damage unless they've got Lord Arcer's 30% increase, and effectively it's only going to be useful against boss units and possessed units, because considering warriors are generally going to be one-shotting basics, they're almost, at an upgraded point, one-shotting elite units. The only thing that they're going to need to dish out some more swings with is going to be the possessed and boss units. But, the last thing is going to be 30% healing back from the damage they're dealing from some of these headshots. Now, apparently you can, utilize the headshot ability for yourself, but that's not going to be a benefit for the team. I mean, it's almost as useful as his heavy attack, healing himself, because most of the time he's healing himself in that moment and not giving other people 25 health, considering the radius is not that large when it comes to that healing from heavy attacks. Overall, this guy needs a rework, and he needs a rework bad. I like the route that they're going with it, where it's kind of like a support healer, support damage in a way, where he's trying to, possibly getting headshots and then having a follow-up headshot that's going to deal more damage. I personally prefer it if they reduce the amount of damage to 10% and made it to where if he gets one headshot on the character, it's 10% damage from all sources for the entire time until he's dead, or possibly for 5 seconds after, something along those lines, and then 10% healing back for anybody that hits him for 5 seconds. That seems more useful than just 30% damage increase for one-time hit, and then having to, communicate that with teammates, and then, waste your own time not only not utilizing your healing ability when it comes to 25 health back for each time, but at the same time you're just not having an ability to even come close to the par of Cheryl or Pablo's healing ability. I mean, it's just an overall poor support character that I'll make the argument you should never use. You should never use it. I think we should all just stop using him, just boycott him until they fix him, because it's absolutely trash. I can't stand the character. Now let's talk about the S tier of S tier survivors. Cheryl. Now Cheryl is it. This is the best survivor in the entire game. This is the one survivor that can go into any survivor group combination and be beneficial. She has the maximum healing, she is the best support class, and she is going to be your best bet at maintaining the health of everybody on your team. As long as somebody knows how to utilize Cheryl and utilize the shimps in an efficient way to maintain everybody's health, 9 times out of 10, nobody should be going down, as long as everybody's sticking together and Cheryl's able to maintain that healing and watch people's health bars and get that shimps in whenever they need it. Now, in the specific case where you may be facing off with an Evil Ash and you cannot utilize the shimps, those moments you should be holding on to 4 amulets, and in those moments start utilizing amulets to heal that person that's getting the beat down from Evil Ash. That's how you can counter that move right there, instead of having to utilize the shimps. In those moments, Cheryl, I'd make the argument that you shouldn't be using those amulets anytime, or the only time you should be utilizing the amulets is once you're already full. You find another one, get everybody to group into that house, immediately pop that, get everybody those shields, and save them for objective moments. Now, whether or not you're going to use it at the start of an objective moment, because if you're playing with warrior units, you want to give those amulets to them. You don't necessarily want to utilize them, but the biggest thing about Cheryl is that she is going to have the most emphasis when it comes to shimps, and she has her own healing AoE ability that may not be doing the maximum amount of health as it was before. It's gotten nerfed since the beginning. It used to do 450 health over 6 seconds, which is quite nice, but now it only does 350, but it's still a decent amount. 350, much better than that 25 healing. Every time you do a heavy strike, because there's no way you're getting 350 off of support Ash in 6 seconds. Let's be real. But at that same point, that's a free heal that you can utilize anytime to just kind of top people off, or just give it or pop it down in some of those moments when they're tanking the boss unit. Just give them that little bit of extra healing, mitigate some of that healing you may need to utilize with the shimps. But at the same time, she's also got an ability that every time as you level her up, I should say, you will be able to reduce everybody's fear anytime that you utilize the shimps. By 25, you'll reduce their fear, so that's going to be even more of a crucial play, especially on objectives. That could be that little amount that reduces that person far enough down to be able to make it to the finish of that objective without being able to get possessed. And on top of that, once you hit her at level 25, every shimps that you're drinking is not only going to be giving them the benefit of that additional healing that you're gaining from just being a support character, but top it off with another 100 health on top of that, as well as if you further increase the amount of shimps health that you're gaining from the skill tree bonus. I mean, warrior classes have a lot of health, and trust me when I say, if you're on support or you're on Pablo or you're on support Ash, those guys are not going to be able to heal those guys but like 30% of that health. But with Cheryl, you'll be able to either get them up to halfway, if not even further than that, based on your level with Cheryl and how much healing you're putting into the shimp's maximum healing inside of the skill tree. But you cannot go wrong with Cheryl on the team. Now, arguably, there's some teams out there that they're going to roll in. They're going to be pretty skilled and knowledgeable and not need a healer. They can utilize their resources, but you're playing a little bit more on the RNG in that moment. But if you've got somebody like Cheryl on your team, not only is she going to be holding more shimps, but she can hold up to a total of 8 shimps. She can start off with a total of 5 shimps at the beginning of the match. And every time that she utilizes the shimps, as long as people are close by, it's going to be an unbeatable combo for any team. And she can be a DPS role. Now, a lot of people don't really realize this. You can do this with any one of the support characters, but it's most beneficial when it comes to Cheryl. But you can be dealing anywhere between 25,000 and 35,000 damage a match. I've even had some matches where I've done over 40k damage by the end of that match on top of a dub. And it all revolves around the revolver. I will be doing a video on this Cheryl DPS healer build, and you'll still be the maximum healer you can possibly be, and the maximum amount of health you can give somebody from reviving them. But it is an absolute power play. She's going to be one of those that really guards the DPS from some of those basic units, really deletes those basic units, and just kind of clears the board when it comes to basic units, on top of also being able to heal the team back up to full health every single time, and really just make a really good economical play or economy play when it comes to maintaining the resources for healing. So a lot of times you really just want to pass that stuff off to Cheryl, considering topping everybody off is going to be much better than just wasting it on yourself, only giving yourself enough health to possibly just run back in and then reduce it all again. And then, next thing you know, other people need that health at the same time, and Cheryl's going to be the one that can provide that maximum amount of health for everybody for the entire match. You just can't go wrong with her. I'll make this argument every single time, and it's a lot of fun to play as Cheryl. I don't know why more people don't do it. I don't know why people just don't jump for this, and I don't know why people consistently go into a match where they're not even max level on a lot of their characters when it comes to DPS, and they'll just roll in and say, who cares? We don't need the support character, because with Cheryl, I mean, it's going to make it the hardest time for those demons to actually get people down, as long as that Cheryl is actually doing what they should be and really properly watching those health bars. Considering you could wait until almost the last moment when that person's one shot and be able to pull them back. And there's nothing that's going to be more psychologically frustrating for that demon than watching that health bar just grow back up after he thinks he's about to get him down and get that power, and then he just gets toppled over with that boss unit. You're going to be shutting him down. You're going to be frustrating him. He may start making some sloppy plays, even if he is a solid demon player. But at the same time, he could be reworking his strategy around focusing on you. But lucky enough, if we utilize the dodge and the skill tree and the stamina within the upgrades at the very beginning, we should be able to dodge any basic units, possessed units, and allow or give enough time for our teammates to assess that threat and take it out as quickly as possible before actually having ourselves go down. But that's going to be the tier list, guys. Hopefully this has been some information that's helpful for you. Some of these characters, you may have some opinions that some of these A tiers are definitely up there at S tier. I imagine some people are going to be like, Pablo is an A tier. There's some arguments to be made, but he's so situational, and the problem is just the simple fact that he just doesn't come in with damage, and at the same point, his situational ability to possibly get away from the demon, revive people, the demon's already gained so much power from some of those moments that it doesn't end up being something that actually could be a bounce back moment from some dramatic event or traumatic event, I should say, that's just going to be able to come back from strong enough in order to take out that demon and go for the win. Whereas with Cheryl, just having the ability to maintain that health at all times and keep people from even going down or even needing to revive people or resurrect them at the same point is just ultimate power play. But on that note, if you'd like to see some of this content live, head on over to that link down in the description. Follow me over at Twitch. We'll be doing some more Survivor gameplay. We'll have some more footage like this as well. So if you'd like to see more content like this, where I go into a deeper dive with some of these characters, talk about the skill trees, some of the different ways that you can build it out, as well as giving you some different play styles and tips and tricks on some of the matches, going through a full match where I did pretty well with it, showcase a lot of the things that you should be looking for, things that are going to be helpful tips for each one of these survivors. Hit that subscribe button. We'll have plenty of that content coming in the future. And on top of that, hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully it's been helpful for you, and have a good one.